Welcome everyone to tonight's conversation with friends. We're so glad to have you here. I am truly thrilled that we were able to bring this series back this year after a little bit of a hiatus. It's been such a wonderful opportunity to connect folks to each other and to hear from incredibly insightful experts in so many different fields and areas. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anna Wyeth. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at Sidwell Friends. And before we get started, I just want to share a couple of very quick housekeeping items. As you heard us mention a few minutes ago, I would love to encourage everyone here tonight to change your Zoom name to include your full name and your connection to the school, whether that's your class year for alumni or perhaps your constituency if you're not an alum. For example, if you're a current parent or a parent of an alum, a grandparent, a former faculty member, etc. And if you've never changed your name on Zoom before, you can do so by hovering over your own name in the participant list. And under the More button, you can rename yourself to add that information in. You can think of this like your virtual name tag. It just lets us know everyone who's here tonight. I'll ask everyone to keep themselves on mute, just again to minimize disruptions. We'll ask questions at the end in our dedicated Q&A portion. So as you listen throughout tonight, if you have questions for our speakers, please feel free to send them to me in the chat, Anna Wyeth, and I will keep the queue of questions and we'll get to that during the Q&A. So now, finally, to get to the real reason we are all here tonight, I'm so excited to introduce you to our speakers. Margaret Peggy Pabst Battin is the Distinguished Professor of Philosophy and an adjunct professor of internal medicine in the Center for Health Ethics, Arts and Humanities at the University of Utah. She's a graduate of Bryn Mawr College and holds an MFA in fiction writing and a PhD in philosophy from the University of California at Irvine. She's the author of prize-winning short stories and the recipient of one of University of Utah's Distinguished Research Awards. And she has authored, co-authored, edited, or co-edited more than 20 books. She has engaged in research and published on ethical issues in suicide, trade titled The Death Debate, as well as several co-edited or co-authored collections, including Drug Use in Euthanasia and Assisted Suicide, a jointly authored volume on the ethics of religious refusal of medical treatment, and the medicine and social justice movement. In 1997, she received the University of Utah's Distinguished Research Award, and in 2000, she received the Rosenblatt Prize, which is the University of Utah's most prestigious award. A second collection of her essays and fiction on end-of-life issues entitled Ending Life was published in spring 2005, and she's also the lead author of two multi-authored projects titled Drugs and Justice, Seeking a Consistent, Coherent, Comprehensive View, and The Patient as Victim and Vector, Ethics and Infectious Disease, which were published in 2009 and 2021, respectively.
That's enough. There and move on. All right.
Thanks, Peggy. As you can see, Peggy is an intense expert in this field, and she's also been named one of the mothers of bioethics, and we're thrilled to have her here tonight.
And my other distinction is going all the way through Sidwell Friends from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And in this company, that means a lot.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Leading our conversation with Peggy tonight is Bob Myers, also class of 1958, who was born and raised right here in DC proper. Bob has a BA in economics from Grinnell College and spent the summer of 1962 participating in an internship with the Kennedy administration. He later went on to get his PhD in economics from Syracuse University and received a Ford Foundation Fellowship for dissertation research and government civil service in Tanzania from 1965 to 67. He later taught economics at Kalamazoo College, was a Ford Foundation project specialist in Nigeria, and served as an economist with the World Bank in DC for nearly 20 years, during which time his two daughters also attended Sidwell Friends, and later 3 grandchildren. Following that, he worked as an international trade consultant, partnering with organizations like USAID and the African Development Bank Group until 2005. He's written 2 books titled Hitchhiking Through the Soul of America, summer of 1961, and Seeking Development in the Deep African Bush, Tanzania, 1965 to 67. Since 2009, Bob has very, very contentedly lived in Auckland, New Zealand city center. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob, who's going to get us started with tonight's event.
Great. Thank you very much. I just want to say before Peggy gets into this that Peggy and I go back, of course, a long way, and we're good friends. This book came along. Peggy is a good writer, so it's a good read. It's a fun read. It's not that long, and it's not contentious. I mean, we're skating on thin ice here in terms of the abortion anti-abortion thing. But Peggy has written. It's not polemic at all. I call it a Quaker writing, a Quaker book. She's gentle and presents consensus. So with that, let me say I love it. And by the way, the graphics in the book are very good. They've been improved from. I've watched this from go. They've been improved. Some of them are quite startling, but that'll rattle your cage. These graphics, some of them. So anyway, over to you, Peggy, to talk about this.
I'm happy to talk about this. And so I have a little group of slides. I will try to zoom through them to make this fast, but this is an introduction to this book. So let me do this and let me share my screen, if you will. Whoops. Can you see this?
Not yet. I can't.
Not yet. I think we have to go.
Peggy, do you want me to share on your behalf?
Yeah, but I'd like to be able to control them is the problem. So let me see if we can. Sorry about that. Isn't this great? Well, let me, while I'm trying to get this solved a little bit, let me tell you about this book. This book came about, I just do not see how to get out of this. Come on.
Peggy, why don't I get started and share them, and then if you're able to, we can switch over to you. Sound good?
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So first slide, if you're seeing this, this is this book, right? And there we go. Now you're showing the, okay. Next. We're going to look at 5 global problems, and I see already that you have an older version of these things, but we'll do with it. 5 global problems. Next. Global population growth. Next. Teen pregnancy in America and elsewhere, in particular child bride pregnancy in many traditional cultures elsewhere in the world. Next. Rape and pregnancy following rape, mass rape. This is a pregnancy in women with serious health problems, of which some estimated 20 to 30% of pregnancy cases involve some kind of health problem with the pregnancy. Next. And how could we not talk about abortion?
Right.
Next. So we often think about these as big social and political global issues, but we rarely think about how they start. So next. Next. They all start in the same way. Next. This way. And this is what allows us to think about all these enormous global problems at once. Next. So this is a nature's arrangement, is a way to think about it. When a fertile female and a fertile male, or an egg provider and a sperm provider, have intercourse during a fertile period, there's about an 85% chance a year that will result in pregnancy, 90% if the female is younger. Next. It doesn't make any difference where it occurs. Next. This is the way it always starts. Now, here's the central fact that motivates this book.
Right.
45% for you mathematicians, I'm sure you recognize this is almost half of all human pregnancy is unintended. And that means either that it's mistimed and is defined as 2 or more years earlier than it would have been wanted, or unintended at all. That's the red pipe down there. Almost half of all pregnancy is unintended. Could it be different? Next. So here's our project here to explore how we could respond to these problems. Second part is to address issues in reproductive rights. So the central concern here is the asymmetry of female and male fertility control. And then here's the third part, and I think that this is the philosophically interesting part of this project, to look at the assumptions that are part of our everyday thinking about sex and reproduction and challenge them. I think there are a lot of them if they were wrong. So here is the opt-in conjecture, I'd like to call it that. What if almost everyone, don't worry about how we get there, this is a thought experiment. What if almost everyone routinely used highly effective, long-acting, user-independent, reversible contraception all the time, except when they wanted to have a child? Next. Universal means universal. These are the moral conditions of this opt-in conjecture. And I have to recognize that when you float a thought experiment like this, the normal reaction is objections. Keep track of them. We want to discuss them. Everyone will automatically have objections, and so we want to hear about them. Reversal means guaranteed reversibility, or it could also mean self-reversibility, right? And also no force by governments, by other institutions like religious institutions or social institutions or any other parties. No forced and no questions asked, period. Now, those are tough moral questions. It's not at all clear we could honor these, but just the same, we're here in a thought experiment to see what might be different. So here's a little background tutorial on contraception, because this project involves contraception. This is the smorgasbord of contraceptives available to women: the pill, the patch, where is it, right? The ring, there it is, right? The female condom, I think that's here somewhere, and lots of other things. Next. But there's a difference here that we need to be aware of, and that's between time of need and hybrid contraceptives. These are contraceptives that you have to do something about. You have to swallow it or insert it or replace it. And also you always need to resupply it. Versus what are sometimes called forgettable or set and forget, or LARC, which stands for long-acting reversible contraception. You don't need to do anything at all. Next. On the left, you see the subdermal implant. That's about a matchstick-sized dispenser, so to speak, of contraceptive hormones that are placed just under the skin of the forearm. And on the right is one of the forms of the IUD. The IUD comes in both hormonal and non-hormonal versions. Next. These are the two kinds of LARC technologies. And of course, we don't need to just talk about these. There might be way better other ones in the future. And let's assume they are safe and side effect free. Next. Here is a resupply and redosing schedules for US contraceptives. And then look at the difference between the male and female common, or Phexi, a new entry, right? From each, this is how often you need to make use of your form of contraception. Each time, or the pill every day, the patch every week, the ring every month, the shot every 3 months. There are various different sizes of this, but that's pretty standard. The ones from the subdermal implant and the IUD down range from 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. And the copper T, Paragard, the particularly frequently used one, this is the non-hormonal one, is good for 10 to 12 years and probably lasts quite a lot longer. Look at the difference between every time and 12 years. That's crucial to this thought experiment. Every time or daily versus 12 years. Next. So what if everyone just happened to have some form of LARC, that's long-acting reversible contraception, except when they wanted to have a child? So now instead of making a negative choice, you're making a positive choice. This is what I call the opt-in conjecture. Next. Would, so to speak, change the default in human reproduction. Next. What wouldn't happen? There wouldn't, think about the impact of having to make a positive choice. More teen mom babies? No. If you were a teenager and you wanted to have a baby, that's something. But these are accidental teen babies, not intended. You're making do with what happened, but, and this was quite trendy for a while, but not fully intended. Next. These are two, I believe these are Afghani men taking their still children daughters to their weddings. Next. There wouldn't have to be rape. Next. Wouldn't be pregnancy revolving from rape or gang violence. Next. Or prostitution. Next. Or rape in war. Here are just some facts about previous rape in war. And the estimate is that only 7% of violence even report this violence. Next. This scene wouldn't have to be, it's not that there wouldn't be the violence involved in this scene, but the resulting pregnancy wouldn't occur, wouldn't need to occur. Next. A pregnancy in various kinds of conditions of pregnancy. Next. Wouldn't occur, there wouldn't be a problem. These are kinds of problems. We'll just hurry through this, keep going. And of this little old 20 million, 210 million people who become pregnant, 8 million suffer from life-threatening complications. And for many, it means long-term morbidities and mortality. Why wouldn't this occur? That's because you next can be able, if you have to make a positive choice, instead of showing up at your doc and saying, yeah, you told me getting pregnant wasn't a good idea right now, you can use timing to take advantage of remissions in disease, or avoid threats of environmental stuff, and you could dramatically reduce these mortality and morbidity statistics. Next. What about global population growth? Next. So this is studies, these are done in many high fertility societies. And on average, when asked, women say they would have been happy with 2 fewer children than they actually have. So if they'd had 9, they would have had 7. If they have 7, they would have been happy with 5. So in this case, if you had to make a positive choice, fertility rates would decline without pressure or force. Next. Well, but of course, that's not the picture we have of fertility today. Next. We noticed declining fertility rates in Europe and many other places, Japan, some of the Far Eastern countries. In fact, as we'll see, mostly in many places, fertility rates are declining. Next. Here's Spain. That's the sense of aging populations. Now there's a confusion that is often made publicly of confusing growth rate declines, that's the yellow line, and the spread that it might be predicted, this is a prediction, with total population growth, which is still increasing because there are so many more people reproducing, even though the rate of growth is declining. Next. And of course, there are regional changes. These are projections also of to 2050 of the different rates from Europe. Look at Europe, little shrivelly Europe way down at the bottom there, versus Africa, the most vigorous part of our globe in terms of reproduction. Next. Why is this relevant to our conjecture? So one thing about population growth is, as we've just said, if you had to make a positive choice, it's less likely that your fertility, your total family size, your rate of reproduction would be high. It would be naturally lower. But this is a tsunami which will sort that wipes out villages and other things. There are many kinds of natural and other catastrophes. Because the conjecture involves long-acting reversible contraception, if there is a catastrophe of some sort, one can go back to fertility as you wish. Next. Currently, the male and female sterilization rates by regions, you see much higher rates of female sterilization than male almost everywhere. All of that could be reversed. Next. Now, what about abortion? Whether you think it's slavery to Satan or, next, something that should be protected. Next. We don't need to solve that issue because if you had to make an active choice, almost all call for abortion would disappear, except for the 7% that involve fetal anomaly or risk to the mother's life or health. That's a big change. That's 93% of abortion. The call for that would disappear. Think how that would change our public life these days, our political life, our social life. Well, what about men? Next. Men are shortchanged, and this is also relevant to this conjecture. Ask any man about what forms of male contraception, what forms of contraception he has that are under his full control. And these have to be his answers because there aren't any others. The condom, withdrawal, and vasectomy. Right? That's what's under your full control. Condoms are not fully reliable. Next. Birth control fraud in the courts is a very interesting field in which men are attached for child support, even if they were lied to. All the other forms of contraception in which the male may participate require reliable information from the female, right? You can't guarantee that. You can't tell whether she's taken her pill, whether she forgot, whether she is attaching you for a child that she wants and you don't, and so on. All of this stuff is stuff that would not be the case if males as well as females had full reproductive control. Next. This wouldn't happen. Next. He doesn't know how much nappies cost. There's a lot of research going on. And this is especially since the recent Dobbs decision that undid the Roe versus Wade protection of abortion. There's a male pill under research right now. There's a male gel. There's research going on even right here in Salt Lake City. There's research going on. This is very promising stuff. Adam is a temporary VAS blockage coming from India. And this research started 40 years ago, is something called RISUG. It's reversible something guidance under guidance. It's a plug that sits in the vas deferens, blocks sperm promotion, but you can flush it out easily. Vessel gel, as I said, this research started 40 years ago. They finally came to the US and sat around. Nobody did anything until next, right? Until, well, until now, when a company named Next Life Sciences has taken up with this form of vessel gel. You can see the gel barrier on that side. It it protects against sperm transfer, sperm passage, and but as I said, you can flush it out. That's in research now, and it looks as though market may come reasonably soon, partly because this is not a drug, but a medical device, and so the license span of time is much shorter and easier. Next. So this is for guys. Think about it, guys. Think about it. That would be presumably effective until you reversed it. So what if everyone, whoops, hang on for 1 second. All fertile women and men who wanted it, and let's just assume, because we're doing thought experiment here, almost all did want it. Safe, side effect free, right? Allows you full personal fertility control. And you can reverse it, get rid of it anytime you want, no questions asked, no tests, no, having to go before some board, no having to schedule, none. You want it, you can have it reversed, period. What would it be like? Next. Next. So if we call this double coverage, males and females, the failure rates for the low effective sorts of you can see these figures here. This is about what happens if there's double coverage with what's possible now in the grayish areas, either the condom or withdrawal, right? That's all that's open to guys except vasectomy, right? Those are the failure rates, but look down in the green. These are conjectural rates about what the failure rate would be if both women and men, that's egg suppliers and sperm suppliers, each had long-acting reversible contraception that was this effective. Estimated 15 per 100,000 per year. Next. And well, we're going to skip right over this topic, but we could argue next. Could it be because the Catholic Church has been the major objector to contraception? Its teaching is that the marital conjugal act must be both unitive and procreative. That presents an ideal. Well, would we think that mutually opt-in contraception actually is mutual opt-in reproduction is both unitive and procreative in the fullest sense? There's not time to go through all of the theology and the very complex and turbulent history of the church's opposition to contraception. But the argument, the question here, remember it's still a thought experiment, wouldn't mutually opt-in reproduction be the willing embrace of procreation, not just putting accidents that happen, of the gift of life? Next. This is such a complex issue that we'd need about 3 more weeks on this call to even make a dent in it. Well, one of the final objections that comes up to any thought experiment is, well, wouldn't it cost too much? Wouldn't it cost too much? Remember, we're talking about 5 huge global problems. We're talking about the asymmetry between male and female reproductive control. But would it cost too much? Well, let's just round out our thought experiment by imagining that it's for free. Here's the manufacturing cost of the copper T. That's the non-hormonal IUD for women. 37 cents, right? And the UN sells this entity in lots of 5,000, at least that has been the price, to lower income countries, lower and middle income countries, maybe just lower, for approximately this price. 37 cents. Next. And this is about male costs. So Sujoy Guha was the inventor of Risung. This is the one that where there's a polymer injected in the vas deferens. He says that you could do it for $10 a man. We made this estimate a while ago. And that it's cheaper than the cost of the syringe used to inject it. But remember, it gives you full reproductive control for, at least the time we made this estimate was already about 14 years. $10 for 14 years. So if we can't go through all of these numbers, but if you looked at the women in total, for 2 billion women in their fertile years and population size, and supposing you started up from zero, overlooking the fact that the majority of the world's women already use some form of contraception, and you assume that they have on an average 2 children, that is about the global average. So that would be 3 units, and you look at this, and then you add men in their fertile years. Men are, once they hit puberty, they are always fertile. They never stop. And you grind all this out. Next, you get an estimate of the total cost. Next. Which would be for during their fertile lifetime. These figures are based on stuff a little bit older, but for men it might be $2.10, and for women $1.53. That's per year. So it's $84. This equals out roughly because men go longer, but women are a little more expensive. Try the other way around. $84 a year. So the total double coverage cost per reproductive couple, that doesn't have to be the same 2 people, but any potentially reproductive pairing of people, $3.63, or for total lifetime fertile, this is for a couple, $168. Next. And that's the total double in blue there. That's about $1/3 of $1 trillion, right? A little less. For all the contraception that all fertile persons, and you think about making it available to everyone, even if they don't all want it, would on average want over their entire reproductive lifetimes, or from approximately 2023 just passed to 2068. That's the price tag. That's not a lot of money. And Bob, I know you're an economist, so you're good at estimating money and how much that's worth. In your scheme of things, this price tag isn't very good. Next. So here we come to, I think, the culminating, in a way, thought experiment parts of why doing a thought experiment like this can teach us about how we think now. Here's the baggage. Next. Here are some of the common assumptions. I think this book has a dozen of them or more. There's no real difference among the various kinds of contraception. Remember we saw that smorgasbord? They're not all the same. And the difference between the things that are resupplied methods, you have to reacquire them, reuse them, and then resupply them again. The difference between that and something that is provides ongoing contraceptive effect for as long as you want it. Right. We also assume contraception is only for the sexually active. This is how teenagers get into trouble. Teenagers, they have a relationship, it's very hot and wonderful, and then they break up. And typically the girl, if she's been taking the pill, stops taking the pill because the boyfriend isn't around anymore. And then the boyfriend might come back, but she's not taking the pill, or she finds another boyfriend and doesn't start retaking the pill until after that next relationship begins. It's a really common pattern among teenagers. Why should we assume that ongoing protection wouldn't be appropriate? We also assume that rape is sexual violation. Well, it is, but it's also, and you don't see this term used very much, it's reproductive violation can be. Those two things are different, sexual violation and reproductive violation. And this thought experiment addresses the second of those. Well, high-risk pregnancies are just medical bad luck. With antecedent planning, one can change a lot about that. Abortion's about choice. Our way we think about abortion is always after the fact of whether pregnancy has begun. We don't need to be doing this, right? This has gotten in as big a political and cultural mess as you could imagine. And we don't need to be having this kind of dissension at all. Population control, does it require coercion? No, if you provide people and make it possible for them to choose the family size that they want, right? You find that total family size and fertility rates drop a lot. One's enough when it comes to contraception. Here's the reproductive equity part. Males and females ought, in this view, this thought experiment makes this possible to both have full reproductive control. Next. There are a lot more of these, but they're all wrong. We just went through that. So this is the picture. This is the picture. Both boy and girl have full personal reproductive control over their own reproduction until they each decide to turn it around. Don't see the movie. The movie, this is just fodder for a movie in which boy and girl bemoan their situations. They've had these devices installed. And the early parts of the movie, they spend a lot of time exhibiting their natural parts to each other and bemoaning their fate. And then there's a lot of, chase scenes, and they're evading the authorities, and they finally manage to elude the authorities and the other, obstacles in their path. And in the last scene, we see them behind a curtain, making a baby in the old traditional way. Well, that's exactly the picture that's here without the cut and chase and the authorities. That is, you make a baby in the old-fashioned way, but when you want to, and not have accidents and unintended outcomes sooner. There we are. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Peggy. My instincts, by the way, are it's a quarter of, my instincts are to get to questions fairly quickly. Let me just say, the two heroes of this book are the opt-in as opposed to opt-out, and the other one is LARC, the reversible, long-acting reversible contraceptive. Those two things make this book, make this thought experiment real. As an economist, I know that the cost figures are all over the place. I mean, nobody will know. In economics, we have a saying, more people live off cancer than die from it. And if this thing takes off, the cost figures are going to change dramatically, because anything worth having, somebody's going to try to make a profit off of. But the real thing here is to want it, to get it wanted, get it opt-in chosen as an approach, and then let the market go. But at any rate, the question really, are there people that have questions is what I would ask.
We do have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat. I'm happy to pose them now. The first is, what effect might be of more universal long-acting birth control? What might the effect be on the rate of sexually transmitted diseases if the method of long-acting and reversible contraception was not such that it also prevented disease, such as a condom, for example?
Well, that's a perfectly good question. And the answer is, this is the thought experiment about reproduction, are ways of reducing the likelihood of transmission of STDs or STIs. At the moment, there's one, right? That's the condom. All those other forms of birth control don't do that. Now, there are now some dual purpose strategies being developed that will provide both hormonal contraception and antiviral or and protectives against, for instance, HIV. These are have been developed especially for use in Africa and elsewhere. But the answer is, these are two separate problems. What you hope for, I think, is a multivalent, universal STD preventive vaccine. Wouldn't that be great? Why have we not thought about developing it already? Somebody who is not engaged in a monogamous relationship but has an active sex, like female or male, would still want to use condoms, right? And dual use with condoms and something like the IUD or the subdermal implant is already common in this country. But that's the picture. So the answer is, it would be great if we could solve that problem too. This conjecture, well, remember, it includes any effective, long-acting, guaranteed reversible device in the future. If you can invent one that does that and this, so much the better.
Thank you. You touched on this a little bit, but another question that came through from your classmate Annette Stiefbold was, given how politically charged issues regarding reproduction have become in the US, what is the likelihood of acceptance of opt-in reproduction in this country?
Well, let's point out that there already is opt-in reproduction in this country. That's anybody who has either a subdermal implant, this is a female device, or an IUD, those are already opt-in, right? We don't have this for males just yet, but this is the opt-in technology for males is right on the horizon. As I said, it's likely to show up soon because it's a medical device and not a drug. So at least my understanding is that we actually might be surprised to see this soon. There's one being developed, the one called Adam. I think this is being developed down in your part of the world, Bob, in Australia, I think.
Yeah.
That is a temporary, it's also a vas blocking device, but it's temporary. It's designed to dissolve after a while, a year, I think. But of course, that actually is not all that great because it requires resupply. Right? The interesting thing about an IUD, a female IUD, the copper 7, the non-hormonal one, just think about it this way. If it's good for 12, maybe 15 years, you have 3 of those that last you a reproductive lifetime. Right? How good is that, right? Rather than taking a pill every day or getting a new patch every week or having to go to the drugstore or go to the pharmacy or somewhere for a new shot, right? All of that resupply stuff is what doesn't have to happen. Now, your quip about more people live off cancer than die from it, Bob, is right to the point here. That it's the resupply modalities that are expensive. They're the ones, there's no incentive for a pharmaceutical company to make something that lasts, say, for 15 years and costs 10 years, right? No incentive, right? So you might have to incentivize this some other way. But the point is, we could do this and it doesn't have to be expensive. Copper 7, 37 cents. Well, not even counting the placement. 37 cents for 12 years is what it's licensed for. Is that a bargain?
Right. No way the economy is gonna put up with that.
That's the trouble with these economists, right? What's at stake here is that when we try to float a thought experiment, it's easy to devolve into thinking about how to get from here to there. And our actual question should be, what's there like? And would we have it? And if we think there would be better, and we might think that because look at the effect on these 5 global problems and on, then we figure out how to
right, it's worth pursuing.
Yeah. So let's go. Are there more?
Well, John has his hand up. John Kaufman, if you want to ask a question, by all means. Oh, you're on mute, John. John, you're muted, John. Unmute yourself. There you go.
He's still muted.
He's getting it.
We all have lived through our children and our grandchildren and so forth and so on. The first problem you have is teenagers who really managed to slip through all of the things that we wish they would do, including reproduction. I did it. I'm sure several of us other of us did it also. And
I assume you mean father to child when you really didn't mean to.
oh, good gracious! I had 4 children, and they were all a blessing in disguise, perhaps.
Right.
But they and I have enjoyed them, every one of them. But I would not say that they were intentional.
So,
except for maybe 1 or 2.
so
But,
I'll put it, we look at the world.
I know, Peggy. This is the wonderful effort. But the in a personal line, the first issue is we all have to address what we do when we are 12 and 13 years old.
Mhm.
and 14 years old. And what the way we think and what we do. And I'm not saying that this is not something that we should address. And because I do think it is something we should pay attention to, and we should endeavor to change in our lives. But the first thing you have to talk about is human nature. and none of us is going to change that.
Well, so we this
So we have to address it. That's all.
start off talking about
Long-acting, reversible concept.
talking about nature's arrangement. That's what I
Yes.
think we call, and that is sex leads to, in 85% of cases, or 90 if the woman is younger, leads, if nothing is done to prevent it, that leads to pregnancy. That proportion of the time, that means almost always over a period of whatever. So that's human nature, and it's a good thing it is that way, because otherwise this species wouldn't have survived the many near extinctions. I think there's said to be 4 of them that human species went through during its period of evolution. But we're on the other side of that now. We're on the side of the product of nature's arrangement, where we are facing, I don't want to be hysterical and say our own extinction, but we are certainly facing problems that come from overgrowth, right? That's what climate change is, that climate issue is partly about. It's not that every human being contributes the same amount to this problem, but that our way of thinking about unlimited growth needs to be rethought. But you don't want to do that by imposing restrictions on individuals. If you let them make their own choices, but they have to be positive choices, the impact is smaller. Let's say you were talking about human nature. Can we get teenagers to think about their reproductive stuff? Well, surely if the default is reversed, if they don't get pregnant by accident and then have to deal with it, but have to choose to be pregnant, that's a whole different picture.
Right.
Oh, so you're going to decide to have a baby with your boyfriend? Well, first let's talk about how you're going to afford that, and then let's talk about how you're going to do this and that and the other thing. That it is the case now that long-acting contraception, the teen pregnancy rate has gone way, way down, something like 60 or 70% since its high in 1991. And it's partly due to less sex, but more of it is due to the use of more effective contraception.
Right.
Right. So we're already seeing this in action, right? So, and look at the other weird thing about teens. For the teen girl who gets pregnant, becomes, I think this is the way to state it, is now emancipated. She's the one that gets to decide, for example, where this was legal, whether to have an abortion or not, what kind of medical care she wants, right? She's a teenager. She might be 14 years old, right?
Or younger.
Or younger, right? Actually, there are cases, one of the OBGYNs that I worked with on this says that the youngest girl she ever delivered was 10.
Ooh.
10 years old, right? I mean,
That's
the thing that
yeah,
we,
this is an issue, Peggy. I don't dispute that.
I see Barbara's hand up, so maybe we should listen to Barbara.
Yeah, I was gonna say, John, let's give Barbara a chance to ask her question. Barbara, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to say I think this is an incredible idea. It it seems as if you've taken into account all the possible objections and all the possible pitfalls, except for one, which is what John has said, human nature. And I wanted to follow up on that because, I mean, I love this idea. And I think that, you know, it, in a rational world, it could work. But one of the things that I've learned since leaving Sidwell is that people are not rational. Many people are not rational. And we learned how to be rational at Sidwell. And the great gift that we received at Sidwell was the ability to do thought experiments of this kind. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And so it's hugely important. It's hugely important. When I say people are not rational, I have a few examples. And also, first of all, I would like to say that if this had been in effect when I was of childbearing age, my life would have been very different. I did not have children, but I had to go through a lot of grief in order not to have them.
Hmm.
So that would have been not there, which would have been great. But I think also about, you know, teenagers are, they're unknown, they're X factors in everything. I mean, you just cannot, providing birth control in this way, as rational and solution oriented as it is, could be, I think, and I'd like to know what other people think, it could be culturally volatile for people. It could be a trigger for many, many people. You already mentioned the Catholic Church, and I'm not saying this is a reason not to do it. I'm not. I'm just saying it's something to be aware of, which I'm sure you are. Countries where children are forced into marriage, teenagers who don't want to have to think rationally about passion, and make adult decisions when they're 13 years old. They could do it if they had really good parents. Catholicism, you addressed that, but I think that falls in the other category of people who take passion and sexuality as they see it and experience it as a mystical, romantic, natural, kind of crazy thing that they shouldn't have any control over. So I'll stop there, but you get my drift.
Peggy, I wonder, Peggy, can I just offer, because there's a question that came in through the chat that really speaks similarly to what Barbara is talking about, which is, and speaks to the book. Does the book get into how the globally available opt-in options could work regarding legislation, funding, longstanding cultural hurdles? What is the feasibility of sort of widespread adoption, and is that discussed in the book?
Yeah, so remember that when you ask a question like that, we're asking about how to get from here to there. And that's always the problem with the thought experiment. You try to say, what would it be like to be there? So there, to answer Barbara's question about teenagers, no teenager would need to worry about any of that stuff. And the parents of the teenager wouldn't need to worry about any of that stuff. They could worry about passion and teenagers, you know, forming affectional units or sexual units or playing, but they wouldn't need to worry about unintended pregnancy, right? Period. Right. Assuming that this was the way teenagers now were, right? As is the case already for many teenagers. That's why the teen pregnancy rate has gone down so far. And that's true for, I saw somebody I think it was somebody who's here now, although I guess not in the chat, actually asking what it would do to sexual, how would this change sex? It doesn't need to change sex at all. Sex can stay exactly the same. It can be responsible, it can be irresponsible, it can be long-term, loving, monogamous, it can be one-night stands, it can be heterosexual, it can be homosexual, it can be bi, it can be trans, whatever. None of that needs to change. It's the consequences of sex that change. Namely, no unintended pregnancy. That's all. That's the only difference, right? And if
But
that want sex in order to have a baby, that is totally possible.
but the short answer about the book is it's no roadmap to getting legislation, to getting that sort of thing. It's a thought experiment.
It's about
Yeah, and you know, you have to pick up from there. The opt-in is so crucial. As I said, the two things that are so crucial in this book are the reversible, long-acting reversible contraception and the opt-in thing. If you want to get a hook on this, think about the people who will say, well, what the heck? There's a morning after pill. What's so different about that from long-acting? It's hugely different.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And whether you think the morning after pill is abortion or not, all of that issue about after the fact dealing with unintended or unwanted pregnancy just goes away.
I want to ask one more question. We have, of course, we could all stay here for another 2 hours, but I do want to ask one more question that came in through the chat, and especially as we just touched on cost. But do you have any sense of, or is this part of what you have explored in this thought experiment, that would the costs of opt-in reproduction potentially be offset by the savings in the costs of unwanted pregnancy?
So I just mentioned of OBGYN physician that I've worked with a lot. Her informal estimate is that by the savings that you would gain in the reduction of high-risk pregnancy, and I should say that there are some entities now that are already doing this. I believe it's the March of Dimes offers pre-conception pregnancy planning. So some months in advance, you show up, you say, we would like to have a baby. Let's review any risk factors. And those can include toxic environments. They can include all kinds of, pregnancy threatening toxins in your household, cleaning agents, cosmetics, that kind of stuff. Any medical conditions, any drugs that somebody is taking, whether they're prescription or informal or illegal. You review all of that before you initiate a pregnancy. Even does the male, the donor of the sperm, the provider of the sperm, live in an area with high bad air quality? It's now evident that bad air influences sperm quality, but sperm is spermatogenesis takes 90 days. So you want to make sure he wasn't living in a bad air place 90 days, that's 3 months before you even begin a pregnancy. It's that kind of pre-planning. So her estimate, this is about cost, is that if it were the case that pregnancy was always intended, and that includes the option to have a sort of careful control beforehand, careful medical attention, that with the savings that would produce, you could almost make reproductive technology available to all infertile couples who now seek it, right? That is, so that's the essence of helping somebody make a baby, right? By having people not make babies unless they want to. Anyway,
But an answer is that there are huge future cost savings. And that doesn't sell well in today's political climate. Everything is about now. And if you put a figure of $1 billion after something, everybody's going to, well, an awful lot of MAGA and conservative people are going to say, don't spend it.
$1 billion, if you think about the enormous problems, how much do we spend on teen pregnancy reduction
Well,
programs?
yeah.
What about poor maternal health or maternal health problems? Anyway, you can see where this is going.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Well,
thank you
go
all.
ahead. Yeah. On that note, I want to give our speakers an opportunity to kind of make some closing remarks as we come to the end of this conversation.
Well, my closing
Uzo.
is thank you for getting it. Right. Because it takes a certain, first you have to get rid of all those faulty assumptions that we were talking about, those misconceptions. In this book, I think there are a dozen or 13 of them. The faulty assumptions, like the ones we looked at the end. Why should contraception only be for the sexually active? And that's a problem because then it's start and stop. Why should one party, but not both, be the primary contraceptor? Well, and the other assumption there is if you have both, and if there are any side effects, you can, because the dosage of whatever it is would need to be lower if you're both contracepting, you can reduce a lot of the problems. But why not equalize reproductive control? Well, anyway, so it have to wire your head around a little bit to get this, but thank you, this good audience, for doing that.
Now, my view is thank you for writing it, Peggy. I mean, I've enjoyed the hell out of this. I will enjoy the hell out of this. I want to stay involved. I'd love to get you down here to New Zealand and Australia over this. But I found it a very liberating thing. This opt-in, I love it. Anyway, so thanks very much for that.
Yeah, if you can flash the title, the first slide on again.
Yes. I will put the link to the book. It's on our registration page and the Conversation with Friends webpage, but I'll make sure that folks
and it's on Amazon right now, right?
For pre-order, right?
Yep, you can get it May 28th is when it comes out.
The book is called Sex and the Planet: What Opt-In Reproduction Could Do for the Globe. We'll make sure everybody gets a link. Thank you so much, both of you, Peggy and Bob. We truly, truly appreciate you being here and sharing your incredible insight and writing and such a unique perspective from both of you. This has been eye-opening and unique and important, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to be here tonight with us. Thank you.
You don't mind if we talk about sex in a school context?
You're all grown-ups here.
Yes, I just want to repeat, thank you so much. Wonderful.
Truly, thank you. I want to thank all of you who are here tonight as well for being here, for being in community with us and participating in events like this. As we shared earlier, this is the last Conversation with Friends for this school year. We are shortly going to dive into the planning for events for next school year, starting in late fall, early winter. So if you have an idea for a topic or a suggestion for someone you think should be a speaker, please reach out to us and let us know. You can email alumni@sidwell.edu. We would love to hear from you. This series is for you and about you, so we want to make sure that we're coming up with topics and featuring speakers that you want to hear from. And with that, I will say thank you and good evening or morning or afternoon, whatever time it might be for you. And we will see you again on a Zoom screen very soon. Thanks, friends.